Hey everyone, Dan here. We are about an hour after market close on Monday, July 12th. We're going to take our Monday look at Palantir. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also, if you'd like to receive a once or twice per week email newsletter from me with trade ideas, setups, signals, opportunities that I see in the market, put your email in the Google form, which is linked in the description below, and I will add you to the list. That won't start until August, and I'll let you know when it's going to start coming in case you want to opt out at that time. All right, so we cover Palantir every Monday, hence the the frenzied chart here from all of the charting that's been done over time. But a lot of these levels still holding. We are going to blow this chart up in a minute and take a fresh look at a couple of things. And then we'll also look at a couple of pieces of data after the chart as well to sort of like see what we might look for in the coming days and weeks ahead. But, you know, Palantir had another red day today, down a little bit. This after this big beatdown that it has had, dropping another 1.5% almost today. So, you know, pretty destructive run here, down from 2750. Much of it kicked off by the sale of shares from Cathie Wood's ARK fund, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. I don't think it was the actual selling of the shares that really like depleted the stock price so much, but it was more the news, sort of the sentiment around what that could mean. But we do see it settling right now along this price target that we had set at 2290, as you know, a clawback zone essentially, and it did bounce nicely off of that 2189 area. So for myself, you know, I'm going to continue to look to buy any future dips on Palantir, especially as it nears $20. I would sort of like scoop up more heavily for myself. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And then, you know, I would look to start sort of taking some profits. You know, if I get good entry prices around that $21 mark, for my shorter term position, and again, for a lot of stocks that I have here, I have a shorter term position that I'm looking for just kind of small wins on, and then I have longer term position for stocks that I think have really good potential in the long term, and Palantir is, you know, one of the stocks that fits this criteria. So on my shorter term position, you know, if I can get sort of a cost basis in around 21.50, $20, something like that, you know, I'd be happy to start trimming my position out around the $25 mark, and then maybe holding some, you know, for the 26, 27 area. But that's my sort of short-term plan on this one. You know, that said, we may get some really solid price strength now that we're settling along this line of 2290, which if that's the case, if we continue this sort of like consolidation action, I will look to take a position in the coming days for a shorter term position, and you know, I would still have like a take profit area around 25, and then closing out probably around mid 26 to 27 for that shorter term position. But like I said, I'd be happy to continue to dip buy down to about the $20 mark before I got too concerned about what's going on. But if we get into the teens, you know, I'd want to take a strong look and see what's happening and kind of reevaluate from there. Let's pop this chart off. What I wanted to take a look at, and I haven't done this yet, so I don't know what what we're going to see. But that's a lot of how I do these videos, because I want to see things in real time and also show folks what I'm doing from scratch and not come sort of like with a bunch of stuff already done. You don't necessarily know how to then recreate it for yourself, which I don't think is that helpful. But I wanted to take the fib levels here and sort of see what's happening with this move from 1635 to 2750, and see if it's sort of coming into any key levels here. Okay, so it's bouncing right along similar areas. You know, this 50% area. Let me switch this to yellow because I find the blue sometimes a little hard to see. Bouncing off that 50% level. So I do think this, you know, potentially puts in play this like 2061 level if it did want to take a further dip down to 61.8, which I wouldn't be that shocked by, given the sort of like length and span of the initial push-up from 1635 to 2750. That said, you know, if it can get support over this 2324, that's probably when I would look to go ahead and take one of these shorter term positions, looking to then trim out like, basically in between this 2487 and 2750, knowing that it's going to hit a bunch of sticky points along the way. First would be this previous topping outs area, and then you have, the topping out just above that from the previous price action, and the support zones that it had flipped from resistance here around just shy of 26 bucks. So that's why I think that sort of like 25, 26, 27, even though they're just sort of like easy round numbers, are probably my trim zones for that shorter term position. Longer term, I'll do a separate video that's not like a Monday recap down the line about my price targets long term for Palantir and what I'm holding that position for. All right, but I just wanted to get a scope on the fib there to sort of get a sense of things. Quick look at the indicators, and we'll go to the data. So pretty low on the RSI, as you would imagine. The selling off put us really dippy, and I would look for it to come back and do something along this midline. Meaning, if it can't bump itself over this 50 mark on the RSI and get sort of like support there. I know it's weird to talk about like support on the RSI, but if it can't get support there, I think it's going to have a hard time running to overbought, which is what I'd be looking for in these like shorter term positions. So I'm going to be really cautious if it comes up toward that 50 and bounces back down and can't find its way over that one. Bearish momentum still coming in quite strong, to be honest, on the hour time frame at least. This dip here, well below the previous dip here, and then even with that, run up on the histogram with the bullish momentum, that just got us back to the baseline. So, not so dissimilar from what we saw here, which then had another big sell-off. So I don't necessarily know what would happen that would cause it to sell off again. Obviously Palantir moves a lot on news items. So we'll see, if there's future catalysts that come in, but in and of itself, obviously RSI and MACD leave a lot of room to run if it can get it going. Also, a good opportunity here, there's a slightly bullish crossover from the MAs, and if it can get support over this 50 MA in the yellow, that would be a strong indication that, we could see that push up that we're looking for at this point, but kind of struggling around that at the moment. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the data. So a couple of things I wanted to look at. One thing here, options activity coming in. There was a bullish sweep that was identified for these are long dated calls. So January 20th, 2023. So not this coming January, the next January. So these are like 18 months out or so. And strike price of 22, right about where it sits right now. So these are considered relatively at the money. Volume of 335 of these were purchased in the sweep, and the open interest is sitting just under 11K. So a pretty solid chunk, and obviously very, very far out, which I think is what's triggering the volume, and the expiration date are what's triggering this as sort of like a unusual activity. But I would keep that in mind. I don't know who purchased that or sort of like what their thoughts are, but something to consider. And then the order flow, some good inflow coming today in large quantities. So again, I don't exactly know who bought, almost 3% of the large volume coming in inflows today. But that's a good sizable chunk, sort of rivaling the days of the big sell-offs when we saw the price get beat down pretty hard. So this could be signaling that there's sort of like a floor being established here, or at least it's being perceived as though there's a floor by whatever institution or large holders are accumulating shares in big order quantities at this time. So on the other side of things, again, we had mentioned I had mentioned this in the last video, but it was just this tiny dip in shares that were held by Cathie Wood's ARK fund, and that dip there, this is what sent the price plummeting. So pretty wacky when you look at sort of like in the vast scheme of things. But again, I think folks are she's been so sort of like overtly bullish on Palantir and has sort of like talked it up a lot. Again, with the backdrop of, a media and an analyst crowd that seems to like really dislike Palantir for whatever reason. So I think she was sort of like the standout in that. And so for her to take any motion in the selling category, then comes this really outsized reaction from the retail side of things. So just keep in mind there are large holdings that she has. There's still over 27 million shares being held by her fund. And here are the sells, the infamous sells, especially this one because it was nearly a million share, nearly 750,000 shares, I guess. But there was a slightly smaller sell a couple of days before that, and then up until then, obviously, it was just buy city for a bunch of these pages looking back. So we'll see if this sort of like unravels as any sort of a trend with Cathie Wood, if she's potentially like changed her mind on or her view on any of this or what have you. But for now, to me, it just looks like a little blip on the screen, not so dissimilar from like this tiny blip. I know it's a little bit bigger, but I mean, all in all, I understand people were used to this sort of like running up in share count, but again, I think it's a tiny blip, and we'll have to wait to see if there's sort of like a larger sort of peak selling that's going to start happening at some point for whatever reason. But I would keep an eye on that and keep an eye on, like, again, just the impact that that's having on the sentiment in the retail market. All right, well, that will do it for this one. I hope you are off to a good start in this trading week, and I wish you the best of luck no matter what you're trading. I will see you in the next video.